Hello everyone! I am going to be making funky cabochons with Sculpey clay. The first thing that you're going to need is a ball of translucent Sculpey. You can either use white translucent or you can use the regular translucent. I don't really think it matters because you're going to be coloring it anyway. This is regular translucent. You're also going to need a small bit of colored clay. This is fuchsia, which I think will be really interesting once I mix it in. You're also going to need some interesting things to mix into the clay to make it funky. So I have a few examples here. The first one is some iridescent glitter. I use this a lot. This is really cheap glitter that I got at the beauty supply store. I think it was 35 or 50 cents for this, and this has lasted me more than a year. I also have some iridescent cellophane flakes. You could use, these are glass flakes. They're platinum colored. They show up really well in the clay. I got these at Michael's. These are iridescent diamond shapes. These also show up really well in the clay. I wouldn't use too many if you have something like this, just because they can overwhelm everything else. You could also use flake glitter. This is Martha Stewart brand glitter. I only mention that because I know that the color doesn't bleed off the flakes with this brand. I can't speak to other brands. But today I'm just going to be using the iridescent glitter and the cellophane flakes. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to color the translucent clay. So I'm just going to go ahead, and you don't need a lot of the colored clay. If you mix too much colored clay into the translucent, it becomes opaque and you can't see the neat things that you're mixing into it. So I'm going to go ahead and just smush that color right into the clay. And you'll notice as I mix it, the color takes on an almost pastel look to it. It will darken up just a little bit when you bake it, but it pretty much stays the same color as it is once it's mixed. So this is still going to be pretty bright, even though it's just a little bit of fuchsia mixed in there. If you did want to do, say, a swirl pattern in your cabochon, make it look kind of tie-dyed, you could wait to add the color until you mix in the fun stuff, and then that way you won't mix it all the way in and you'll end up with these swirls of opaque color in there, and that's pretty interesting too. Alright, so this is just going to take a minute. And it doesn't have to be perfect at this point because you're going to be mixing the clay some more anyway. So I'm just going to stop right there, and I'm going to smush it out into like a little patty or like a little sheet here. The first thing I'm going to add are going to be the cellophane flakes. I like to use a ton of these just because I like the way they look, but you can, you can go a little easier than I am if you want to. It's really up to you however much you want to add. Whatever look you're going for, that's entirely up to you. And I make a little packet out of the clay just to kind of hold the flakes in there. And as you can see what's happening, some of them are falling out, and that's normal. I always put something down to protect my work surface when I'm doing this because I tend to get really messy, especially with the glitter. So like right now I have a piece of wax paper down. That way I can just scoop up all the little bits that fall out as I'm making my cabochon. Okay, and again, this doesn't have to be mixed perfectly at this point, but I'm going to smush it back out into a little patty, and I'm going to add the glitter. And again, I like to use a lot of glitter. I like to add a lot of stuff to these. It makes them really interesting. The translucent clay lets kind of whatever you mix in really shine. So to me, that's a lot of glitter. Might not be to you though. Again, mix however much you want into it. And I'm just kind of trying to get the glitter into the middle of the clay so I make the least amount of mess possible, but it is gonna spill out a little bit. So we'll mix that in. And at this point, you really do want to mix it together so that everything is evenly dispersed. And give a little roll, a little bit more of a smush. So now we kind of have what just looks like a big mess. But once you bake it, it'll look really cool. So now if you're going to form your cabochons by hand, I would go ahead and let the clay rest for a little bit because it's pretty sticky right now. I mean, it's very soft from all the smushing. I'm going to be using a Sculpey mold, so I'm just going to tear off a hunk because it doesn't matter whether it's soft or not. The mold I'm going to be using is right here, and I like these molds made by Sculpey because you can just press the clay into the cavity and bake it right in the mold. You don't need release, you don't have to use any powder and then bang the shape out of the mold and maybe distort it. I find it really handy. They're also very handy because you can make the exact same shape over and over again, just like you can with any other mold, really. I also have another mold that I like to use, which is this one. This is really a resin mold. You can't bake the Sculpey in it. So what I do is I coat the inside with baby powder, and then I give it a good whack after I press the clay into it, and the clay comes right out, and then I bake it. But for this one, I'm using the Sculpey mold, so I'm just going to smush the clay down into the mold, or into the cavity. I'm going to scrape off whatever excess I have here. And once you've got it formed, you know, into the cavity, or you've got yours hand formed the way that you want it to look, you're going to bake the clay according to the manufacturer's instructions. So this is Sculpey, so you bake it at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes per 1/4 inch. This is just about a 1/4 inch deep, so I'm going to go bake it for 30 minutes. Okay, so here's the cabochon. It's been baked and it's cooled off. You can see it's still pretty matte. You can see some of the glitter, but you can't really see the cellophane bits. Like there's one right there, there's another little one right here, but it's still pretty matte, so you can't really tell what's going on there. I'm going to go ahead and sand this with 400 grit sandpaper, and then 600 grit, and then 1000 grit to get it really smooth. And then I'm going to apply varnish, and I like to use Diamond Flecto Varathane varnish. It's safe for the clay, it doesn't make it sticky. This is gloss varnish. It's my favorite kind. I find it really easy to use. You can buy this from a hardware store, but you have to buy it by the gallon, so that's kind of not very useful. So I buy mine from polymerclayexpress.com. They provide it in these handy little bottles, and it lasts forever. I've probably had this one for 6 months already, and you can see I'm maybe a third of the way through the bottle. So I'm going to go ahead and sand the cabochon, and I'll be right back. And here's the finished cabochon. It's been sanded down smooth, and it's had the super glossy varnish applied. As you can see, when I move it around, the glitter really stands out now, and the cellophane is much more obvious than it was before. In person, it's really iridescent. You can really see it. The glare from my lighting kind of hides it a little bit, but you can also see the variances in the clay, which I think makes it extra funky. So this is the finished product. Have fun,